Then you have this from Billy Bush, who of course is a great entertainment reporter in particular, weighing in on the fact that Romy Reiner, who is, I think, only 19 or 20, she's the one who found her parents with their throats slit and bodies stabbed multiple times. And there's new information in this soundbite. Listen here from Billy Bush.
It all started like a dream Hollywood romance and crashed into a nightmare no one saw coming. The Reiners had it all, the kind of family people envied. Rob Reiner, the legendary filmmaker who gave the world timeless classics, and his wife Michelle, the quiet but strong heart that kept their home together. Their kids grew up surrounded by fame, creativity, and what looked like endless love.
I got this from a friend who lives in the community. I heard that the son, Nick, went into his parents' house, stabbed both mom and dad, and that the daughter, I guess, lives on the property or at the house or in the back house, and that she found them, and that the mom was still alive, and apparently she called the ambulance and went in the ambulance with her mother.
But behind those red carpet smiles, something dark had been brewing for years. Tension kept simmering until one cold December night when it finally exploded into chaos that shook all of Hollywood. Now their son, Nick Reiner, stands accused of a crime so painful it tore his own family apart, while his sister, Romy, swears there's more to the story than anyone knows. Secrets, guilt, loyalty, and legacy all collided that night, creating one of the most chilling Hollywood mysteries ever whispered about. The truth hiding inside the Reiner home is messy, twisted, and terrifyingly unclear. Rob, the man who built his career on stories of love and family, suddenly found his real-life story flipping into heartbreak and confusion. Nick Reiner's struggles had played out in public for years, putting constant pressure on the family. Everyone saw the headlines, but no one imagined how bad it really got before everything fell apart. Investigators are now revisiting old interviews, digging up statements Nick once made about his dad. Words that might reveal this family storm had been brewing long before that tragic December night. It all came crashing down on December 13th, 2025. A night that was supposed to be filled with laughter and joy. Rob and Michelle were at a glitzy Christmas bash, hosted by Conan O'Brien, surrounded by friends, Hollywood elites, and all the festive cheer in the world. But behind those lights, something unthinkable was about to unfold. Even with all the glitz and laughter in the air, something underneath felt off. Witnesses later said the night took a sharp turn when a heated argument exploded between Rob and Nick. And it wasn't quiet or calm for even a second. Voices rose, faces tightened, and the whole mood in the room flipped in an instant. Guests started whispering, exchanging uneasy glances, as the cheerful Christmas buzz turned into something way more tense. People at the party said Nick's vibe was strange, like something inside him was ready to snap. His behavior had everyone on edge, and that uneasy feeling spread fast.
And the sister, if you see the pictures of Romy, the sister, I guarantee you she knew. And again, reportedly, she was the one who called the cops and said, check out Nick.
But here's the jaw dropper. Nick now claims he's completely innocent of everything that went down that night. He swears the real chaos started with Romy Reiner, saying she was the one who turned the whole situation upside down. Nick insists he's been unfairly blamed and says he's finally ready to tell his side of the story, and he's not holding back this time. By the next morning, Hollywood was buzzing with rumors. The whispers from Conan's Christmas party were everywhere. One guest said Nick had the whole room completely on edge, and that quote spread through the gossip world like wildfire. Investigators started digging in, trying to figure out what really went down in those tense hours before everything spiraled out of control. Through it all, Rob Reiner didn't back away. He faced his son head on, trying to calm things down instead of pretending nothing was wrong. Michelle stayed right by his side, calm but fierce, never leaving him for a second. The two moved like a team, doing everything they could to stop the night from completely blowing up. When Rob and Michelle finally decided to leave, they didn't storm out or make a scene. They left with quiet determination, almost like they were trying to lead Nick away from the flashing cameras and judgmental stares. To the guests watching, it looked like two loving parents doing whatever they could to protect their son and their family from turning into Hollywood's next big scandal. They didn't look angry. They looked shattered. You could see it in their eyes, was that desperate kind of heartbreak from people just trying to hold everything together. But while Rob and Michelle tried to keep their cool, Nick's expression told a whole different story. Witnesses say they overheard Nick muttering, "I'm not the one causing all this. It's Romy stirring everything up." That one line froze the room. It became the quote everyone couldn't stop talking about. Guests were stunned, and from that moment, whispers started swirling that something much deeper was going on inside the Reiner family than anyone realized.
Michelle died in the ambulance, but had enough time to tell her daughter that it was Nick, their son, who stabbed them. And that's why they figured it out so quickly, and he's in custody.
Later that night, Rob took a call from his old friend, Eric Idle, and the mood couldn't have been more different. The two laughed and joked like nothing was wrong, tossing around creative ideas and cracking up over plans for the long-awaited Spinal Tap 2 project. According to Eric, the chat was pure excitement and inspiration. No sign of family tension at all. Rob sounded upbeat, focused, and ready to take on the world again. But behind that confident voice, few people knew that just days earlier, Rob had opened up to a close friend in a quiet moment of worry. His voice reportedly trembled as he said, "Sometimes I don't know how to reach Nick anymore." Those words hit differently now. They sound almost like a warning, a sad glimpse into the pain he'd been carrying. Meanwhile, Romy was confiding her own truth to someone close, saying, "Nick's blaming me for things I didn't even do." That tension between the siblings had clearly been boiling for a long time. Every word they exchanged seemed to pull the family further apart, adding more mystery to the heartbreaking night that followed. When the Reiners returned home to their elegant Brentwood house in the early hours of December 14th, something dark and unsettling happened. Something that would shake everyone who knew them. The Los Angeles District Attorney's Office later confirmed that the tragedy unfolded before sunrise, though the exact moment remains uncertain. What's known is chilling. Sometime around 3 p.m. later that day, their daughter Romy, who lived just across the street, tried to reach her parents but got no answer. Worried, she walked over, and the instant she stepped inside, she said she felt it. The air was heavy. Something was terribly wrong. Within seconds, she was on the phone calling for help. Paramedics and LAPD officers rushed to the scene, their sirens slicing through the quiet Brentwood morning. When they entered, they found Rob and Michelle unresponsive, sending instant panic through the house. The property was sealed off immediately, and detectives launched a full-scale investigation, treating it as a serious domestic incident from the very start. But here's what stunned everyone. There were no signs of forced entry anywhere. Every door, every window, locked tight and untouched. Nothing was broken, nothing was out of place, not even a curtain moved. That single detail flipped the whole investigation upside down. It meant whoever was involved didn't have to force their way in. They either belonged there or were welcomed in without hesitation. Detectives started canvassing every house on that quiet, tree-lined Brentwood street, but things only got stranger. Not one neighbor heard anything that night. No screams, no glass breaking, no alarms blaring. Just pure, chilling silence.
Romy's 28, FYI, but that's a critical piece of the prosecution's case right there, you guys. If it's called a dying declaration, it comes into court, even though it's hearsay, because it's an out-of-court statement by someone.
The kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful. It feels wrong. Almost like the entire house had been frozen in stillness while something dark was unfolding behind closed doors. People who lived nearby said the Reiner home was known for being peaceful and secure, the kind of place where even a door closing too hard would echo down the block. That's exactly what made that eerie quiet so spine-tingling. One investigator even said, "It felt too quiet to be normal, like something was deliberately hidden in that calm." Then came another shocking twist. Nick Reiner spoke up again. This time he claimed, "I wasn't even there when it happened. Romy's hiding something. She knows more than she's saying." His words sent a wave of shock through Hollywood and everyone watching the case unfold. But Romy didn't stay silent. She fired back to a close friend. "Nick's twisting everything. He's trying to make me the villain. The back and forth between the siblings only added more smoke to an already confusing fire. Investigators started realizing whoever moved through that Brentwood home that night knew every inch of it, every hallway, every sound, every shadow. Whoever it was moved with eerie calm, like they'd done it 1,000 times before. Nothing felt rushed. It was all slow, deliberate, and unnervingly precise. That silence inside the Reiner home wasn't peace. It was pressure. It was tension, just waiting to explode. As detectives pieced together the timeline, all eyes turned squarely on Nick Reiner, and suddenly the pressure was on him. According to police records, Nick left the Brentwood home shortly after the tragedy, around 4 a.m. on December 14th. Just a short time later, he showed up at the Pierside Hotel in Santa Monica, walking in like it was any ordinary morning. Hotel staff later told investigators that Nick looked calm, polite, and completely composed, like nothing had happened at all. No shaking hands, no darting eyes, no hint of panic. Nick Reiner walked into that hotel like any other guest, calm, polite, and totally collected. One employee even said he smiled, asked about the breakfast menu, and didn't seem the least bit tense. But just hours later, when detectives returned to search that very same room after he'd checked out, what they found made everyone freeze in disbelief. According to reports, investigators uncovered evidence inside that room directly tying back to what happened inside the Reiner home. That single discovery instantly pulled Nick right into the heart of the investigation. His quiet hotel stay was now linked to the Brentwood tragedy in a way that couldn't be ignored. It was the clue that shifted everything. But here's where it got even stranger. Nick's stay at the hotel barely lasted a few hours.
But a dying declaration comes in over hearsay objections. So if Romy Reiner is actually going to take the stand and repeat that her mother told her as she lay dying that it was Romy's brother, Nick. Oh, my God.
He checked in, stayed silent, and then slipped out before sunrise, like he didn't want anyone to know he'd even been there. It was as if he was trying to stay one step ahead of the chaos. Later that same day, security footage surfaced from a gas station near Exposition Boulevard and Vermont Avenue. And there he was again, cool as ever, walking in, grabbing a bottle of water, paying for it, and heading out like it was just another normal morning. No signs of fear, no anxiety, no guilt, just that same calm, unreadable expression. When reporters later pressed him about where he was that morning, Nick responded flatly, "I had nothing to run from. I didn't do anything wrong. Romy knows what really happened." That one line blew up across social media within minutes. It became the quote everyone couldn't stop talking about. Hours later, someone close to Romy claimed she broke down in tears, saying, "Nick's lying again. He's trying to pin this all on me." The tension between the siblings had turned into a public storm, and the internet was eating up every new twist. By 9:15 p.m., police finally tracked Nick near Exposition Park, right next to the University of Southern California campus. For investigators, it felt like the net was closing in, like the case was reaching a breaking point. But Nick kept insisting it was all just a misunderstanding that went too far. Everything about Nick's calm behavior clashed with the chaos exploding around his name. The whole city was buzzing, and yet there he was, steady, quiet, almost too composed. Patrol cars swarmed the intersection near Exposition Park, their flashing red and blue lights bouncing off every surface, painting the night in tension. The scene was intense but controlled. No shouting, no struggle, no wild chase. Bystanders stood frozen, watching as officers surrounded Nick Reiner with practiced precision. And through it all, Nick barely said a word. He kept his cool, followed every instruction, and didn't resist for even a second. Within minutes, it was over. He was in custody, calm as ever, while the world outside spiraled with speculation. As the night stretched on, detectives began piecing together the story. A fiery family argument, an eerily quiet home, no forced entry, and a strange trail that stretched from Brentwood to Santa Monica to downtown Los Angeles. Each piece made the mystery even darker, hinting that this wasn't just a simple domestic dispute. It was something far bigger and far more chilling. But one question still haunted everyone involved. What really happened inside that Brentwood home before sunrise? That's when the investigation kicked into overdrive. Once the Reiner residence was locked down and cleared, forensic teams poured in, ready to dissect every corner of the home. They moved carefully but fast, snapping photos, collecting evidence, analyzing every surface for signs of what might have unfolded behind those perfect walls. Inside the command center, the air was thick with focus. Investigators huddled around glowing screens, maps, and timelines, trying to rebuild the missing hours minute by minute, like trying to solve a puzzle with half the pieces missing. Then, the medical examiner stepped in to start a full time of event breakdown. A meticulous reconstruction of how and when everything might have happened. With no security cameras inside the house and no clear digital timestamps to rely on, science became their only witness. They studied microscopic temperature changes, small traces on surfaces, and the faintest physical clues left behind by whoever had been there. Every mark, every fiber, every trace suddenly mattered. Each clue carried massive weight.
In all the pictures of Romy, you can see, at least I think I see in the eyes like a concern, like a pain. There's the absence of a joy that you see in the other brother's face. And then you see Nick, who looks deeply disturbed in every photo. He looks progressively disturbed, progressively more like a criminal.
It was a race against time, and every tiny detail could be the one to finally reveal the truth hiding inside the Reiner home. Just when investigators thought they were closing in on solid answers, everything flipped again. During questioning, Nick reportedly looked detectives straight in the eye and said, "You're wasting time. I didn't do anything. Romy was there after me. Ask her." That single statement sent the entire case spiraling into chaos. Romy's response came fast. Through her lawyer, she allegedly fired back, "Nick's twisting the truth again. He's just trying to save himself." The family's heartbreaking divide was now exploding in public, and every word they threw at each other made the truth harder to see. Meanwhile, forensic experts doubled down on their work, zeroing in on two key physical signs: rigor mortis, the body's natural stiffening after death, and lividity, how blood settles once circulation stops. These two scientific clues were the anchors of the investigation. They could reveal when tragedy struck and help map out the final timeline. The forensic team worked around the clock, examining every detail, running tests, and comparing temperature data with physical evidence. They weren't just relying on guesses. They were letting science speak. Still, even with all the data lined up, one fact stood out like a red flag. The truth wasn't just in the evidence. It was buried beneath two completely different versions of the same story. After careful analysis, the medical examiner reached a chilling conclusion. Both Rob and Michelle Reiner likely passed away in the early morning hours, nearly 12 hours before anyone discovered them. That revelation matched what detectives had feared all along. The tragedy unfolded deep in the night during those silent hours when the whole neighborhood slept, completely unaware that something unthinkable was happening just a few doors away. From there, the investigation laser-focused on the physical evidence inside the home. Forensic specialists carefully examined the injuries and described them as sharp force wounds, meaning they were caused by something with a cutting edge, possibly a knife. That discovery shifted everything once again. The calm, elegant Brentwood home, once filled with love, art, and laughter, had turned into the scene of a calculated, devastating act. Every new clue only deepened the mystery. And the terrifying question still hung in the air. Who really did it, and why? Or something just like it. A blade, a sharp-edged tool, something meant for close contact. The wounds weren't from afar. They came from up close, face to face. Investigators confirmed the person responsible had to be standing right beside the victims, within arm's reach. It wasn't a distant act. It was personal, deliberate, and painfully direct. But what truly stunned the forensic team wasn't just how the injuries were made. It was their pattern. The wounds repeated, layered, almost rhythmic, revealing a struggle that didn't end quickly. This wasn't a flash of chaos. It was drawn out, tense, and heartbreakingly violent. Every expert who reviewed the findings said the same chilling thing. The level of intensity was shocking. The detailed report painted a grim picture of what may have unfolded inside that once peaceful Brentwood home. It wasn't one moment of fury. It was a slow, deliberate sequence, step by step, each move filled with emotion and intent. One forensic specialist reportedly put it bluntly, this wasn't random. Whoever did it stayed until it was over. When detectives shared those results with Nick, his reaction was instant. He shook his head, his voice breaking as he said, "That's not me. I didn't hurt them. Romy was there after I left. She's the one they should be asking about." His tone cracked, half fear, half frustration, like a man trying to convince himself as much as anyone else. But Romy didn't stay quiet either. In private, she allegedly told a close family friend, "Nick's lying because he knows what really happened. He was still there when everything fell apart." The war of words between the siblings had turned into a full-blown clash, each pointing the finger at the other while detectives scrambled to find something solid in the middle of all the chaos. From a legal standpoint, investigators couldn't afford to take sides or get caught up in emotions. They had to stay cold, methodical, focused only on what the evidence showed. And that evidence was starting to tell its own story. It hinted that whoever had been inside that home didn't stop once things began. That the act was intentional, not impulsive. Even as science built the structure of the timeline, the human story underneath kept twisting tighter.
You know, you never know what goes on behind closed doors and how people are. And you have a son there frustrated at not being able to effectively communicate with his own father for whatever reason, that his father couldn't express himself in the way the kid needed.
Nick and Romy were locked in a bitter, heartbreaking battle of blame, and somewhere between their stories lay the truth that no one could yet untangle. After the forensic reports dropped, the storm around Nick Reiner exploded. Within hours, he was officially charged with 2 counts of first-degree homicide, one for each of his parents. In California, that's as serious as it gets. These are the kinds of charges reserved only for cases where prosecutors believe the act was intentional and maybe even planned long before it happened. The courtroom energy was electric from day one. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted, and whispers filled every corner of the gallery. But the intensity only grew when prosecutors added special circumstances to the case. A legal upgrade reserved for situations involving multiple victims. Under California law, that one addition changes everything. It pushes the case into the highest level of severity possible. And this wasn't just courtroom drama or tabloid noise. Those words meant Nick Reiner now faced the harshest outcome the justice system allows. If convicted, he could spend the rest of his life behind bars with no chance of parole. The Los Angeles District Attorney's Office came out strong, saying the evidence against Nick was airtight. Their public statement hit like a bombshell, echoing across every news network. According to them, the forensic proof met every legal threshold for such extreme charges. Overnight, the Reiner tragedy wasn't just a family heartbreak anymore. It had turned into one of the most explosive legal battles Los Angeles had seen in years. Yet, even as the charges stacked up, Nick didn't back down. Standing beside his attorney, surrounded by flashing cameras, he made his declaration clear and loud. "I'm innocent. I didn't do this. Romy set me up. She's been twisting things since day one." His voice echoed through the courthouse halls, and within minutes, that clip was playing nonstop on every major news channel and social feed. But Romy wasn't staying silent either. Through her legal team, she shot back, "Nick's creating stories to save himself. He knows what really happened in that house." The tension between the siblings had reached a level so intense that even seasoned prosecutors reportedly said they'd never seen a family dynamic this fractured before. Behind the courtroom spectacle, detectives continued refining their case, building a crystal-clear timeline, confirming cause of death, and tracing Nick's movements across Los Angeles hour by hour. Every piece fit together, an intimate struggle, no forced entry, and physical interaction inside the Brentwood home that tied directly to the forensic findings. As the evidence tightened around him, one thing became clear. This wasn't just a legal battle anymore. It was a full-blown fight for the truth, and both Nick and Romy were willing to burn everything down before letting the other win. The case was closing in fast. The The tension so thick it felt like the entire city was holding its breath. Everything had built to this moment. Every secret, every accusation, every shred of evidence was about to be dragged into the light. When Nick Reiner finally stepped into court for the first time, the room went dead silent. You could almost hear the weight of it hit everyone at once. He walked in wearing a plain gray outfit, escorted by deputies, his expression calm but distant. The whole courtroom froze. The lawyers, the press, even the judge seemed to pause for a split second. This wasn't just another routine hearing. It was the turning point in a case that had already left Hollywood stunned. It all went down on the morning of December 17th, 2025. Nick was brought into a downtown Los Angeles courtroom under heavy security for his initial appearance. Up until that moment, the case had been sealed away, hidden behind police files, coded reports, and vague statements. But that morning, everything changed. For the first time, it all stepped into the public eye. This was where the whispers stopped and the legal war began. From that moment forward, every word, every reaction, every detail would be locked into the official record forever. The courtroom felt like a movie set straight out of a thriller. Intense, controlled, and dead quiet. The court banned all cameras, live streams, and media footage. No one was allowed to film what happened inside. Only a small circle of reporters, lawyers, and court officials were given access, and every one of them was glued to the doors, waiting for Nick to appear. When those doors finally swung open, time seemed to slow. Two deputies led Nick in, his steps echoing through the silence like thunder in a storm. He didn't speak, didn't flinch, his face unreadable, his movements slow and steady. But then, for just a heartbeat, his eyes darted toward the gallery. One reporter swore they saw him mouth the words, "I didn't do this." That single silent moment hit like an earthquake, and the internet exploded. Within minutes, the phrase was trending worldwide, sparking debates, arguments, and endless theories. That first court appearance wasn't just procedure. It was theater, tension, and raw emotion all rolled into one. And as the gavel struck, one truth became clear. The real battle was only just beginning. As the judge began reading the charges, the entire courtroom went still. You could have heard a pin drop. Nick Reiner stood motionless, his hands clenched tightly in front of him, occasionally shaking his head as if trying to make sense of the words echoing through the air. When the judge asked for his plea, Nick's voice broke the silence, firm and clear. "Not guilty. I loved my parents. I would never hurt them. Romy knows the truth." That declaration hit the room like a lightning bolt. It was the first time Nick had spoken publicly since his arrest. And just like that, the quiet tragedy of Brentwood exploded into a full-blown courtroom saga the entire nation couldn't look away from. But what grabbed everyone's attention first that morning wasn't even what he said. It was what he wore. Nick stepped into the courtroom dressed in a harm prevention smock. That pale, padded garment used for individuals under close watch in serious custody situations. Against the polished wood and sharp lines of the courtroom, it stood out like a scar, a haunting symbol of how far things had fallen. The gallery went silent. Reporters scribbled furiously. Guards exchanged nervous glances, but not one person spoke about it. Not the judge, not the defense, not even the prosecution. The hearing pressed forward, but the energy in the room had completely shifted. Everyone could feel the weight of what was happening.
As of 2016, Nick had gone to rehab 18 times, which means he was, I think, 22 in 2016. And that means that in 7 years, he went to rehab 18 times.
Then came the official reading of the charges, delivered in a voice so cold and methodical, it barely sounded human. 2 counts of first-degree homicide, 1 for Rob Reiner and 1 for Michelle Reiner. No emotion, no commentary, just the law speaking through the clerk's voice, every word landing heavy like a hammer. When the judge asked if he understood his rights, Nick responded softly but firmly, "Yes, Your Honor." That short acknowledgement was the only other time he spoke during the entire session. He didn't make eye contact with anyone in the gallery, not even Romy, not his attorneys, no one. He just sat there, straight-backed and rigid, staring straight ahead, as if locked in his own thoughts or bracing for something only he knew was coming. Observers said his face was unreadable, part calm, part numb, like a man split between fear and defiance. The courtroom buzzed with quiet tension, everyone trying to read him, to find something in his expression that might give away what he was really thinking. But what truly left the biggest impression wasn't his words or even his silence. It was the way he refused to react. No tears, no anger, no visible cracks in his composure. Just that haunting stillness, the kind that left everyone wondering whether it came from control or from guilt. When the charges were read again, a reporter sitting near the front swore they heard Nick whisper under his breath, "I'm innocent. Romy knows it." It was quiet, barely more than a breath, but it was enough. That tiny moment spread like wildfire through the courtroom and within minutes through every news outlet covering the case. Once the formal charges were done, the attention shifted to scheduling. Nick's defense attorney stood up and requested extra time before entering a formal plea, saying they needed to review new evidence and fresh witness statements that had just surfaced. The judge nodded almost immediately, resetting the arraignment date to January 7th, 2026. The prosecution didn't object. Even they seemed to recognize the sheer weight of what was unfolding right in front of them. There was no shouting, no heated back and forth, no courtroom theatrics, just a thick, suffocating silence that filled every inch of the space. It was the kind of silence that carried power. Everyone in that room could feel it. Beneath the calm, you could sense the buzz, the tension, the unspoken knowledge that this story was far from over. And that whisper, "Romy knows it," changed everything. It added a brand new twist to a case already drowning in mystery. Suddenly, the question wasn't just whether Nick was guilty. It was what Romy really knew. By the time that tense morning wrapped up, one thing was absolutely clear. This was only the beginning. The silence inside that courtroom was louder than any headline or camera flash. It felt heavy, electric, like everyone present knew they were watching the opening act of what would become one of the most gripping courtroom battles Los Angeles had ever seen. Then came another jaw-dropping revelation that sent a ripple through the crowd. The man standing beside Nick Reiner wasn't some rookie public defender. It was Alan Jackson, one of California's most powerful and seasoned defense attorneys. The second the judge announced his name, the room shifted. People exchanged glances. Reporters' pens froze mid-sentence, and even the prosecution's table tensed up. Alan Jackson wasn't just any lawyer. He was a heavyweight, a courtroom tactician known for walking into impossible cases and turning them upside down. This was the man who'd gone toe-to-toe with prosecutors in some of the country's most controversial trials, the kind that dominated headlines for months. His client list alone read like a storm of scandals. Kevin Spacey, Harvey Weinstein, and Karen Red, among others. The second his presence was confirmed, everyone understood. This trial wasn't going to be quiet anymore. The calm before the storm had officially ended, and with Alan Jackson stepping in, the Reiner case had just transformed from a Hollywood tragedy into a high-stakes legal showdown that was about to shake California's justice system to its core. Nick Reiner's decision to bring Alan Jackson onto his defense team sent a message louder than any public statement ever could. He wasn't backing down. This wasn't some quick fix or quiet legal patch job. No, this was the opening move in a full-scale courtroom war. The signal was clear. Nick's camp was gearing up for a long, grinding fight, the kind that could stretch on for months, maybe even years. His team was ready to face deep scrutiny, endless filings, and a non-stop legal tug-of-war over every last shred of evidence. It wasn't just about proving innocence. It was about survival. Outside the courthouse, reporters could barely contain the frenzy. The second Alan Jackson's name dropped, the whispers turned into a roar. One insider was overheard saying, "That's the kind of lawyer you hire when you're fighting for your life." And they weren't exaggerating. Jackson's reputation alone meant the case had just leveled up, and everyone watching knew it. Meanwhile, a source close to the Reiner family claimed that Romy was stunned when she found out about Nick's new legal powerhouse. She reportedly told someone he's trying to look innocent by going big. He knows he's cornered. That quote made its way through media circles within hours, painting a picture of a family now completely split down the middle. As the hearing wrapped up, Nick was escorted out the same way he came in, silent, serious, and surrounded by deputies. He didn't flinch at the flashes of cameras, didn't glance toward reporters, and ignored every shouted question that echoed through the hallway.
They did tough love. That's what he's saying here, that the parents said, we are not going to fund your life, your apartments, your landlord, your bills, until you get help.
The whole scene felt like something out of a crime drama, cold, tense, and heavy with unspoken emotion. Neither side gave a statement. Not the defense, not the prosecution, just silence, broken only by the soft buzz of reporters trying to make sense of what they'd just witnessed. Within minutes, the courtroom emptied out, but outside, the firestorm was just beginning. By that same afternoon, the conversation had shifted completely. Forget the legal motions. Everyone wanted to know one thing. Who was paying for Nick Reiner's powerhouse defense team? The whispers started immediately. In the legal world, people knew what a case like this meant. 2 counts of first-degree homicide with special circumstances could drag on for years and burn through a fortune before even hitting trial. Lawyers, investigators, analysts, all of them began speculating where the money was coming from. Was it family funds, industry connections, someone stepping in quietly behind the scenes? Whatever the truth was, one thing was certain. The stakes had just skyrocketed. The Reiner case was no longer just a Hollywood tragedy. It had turned into a multi-million-dollar legal showdown that was only getting bigger, louder, and more dangerous by the day. Cases like this don't come cheap. They demand everything. Top-tier forensic experts, private investigators, psychological consultants, and a flood of pre-trial motions that stack up like mountains. Legal insiders knew the math instantly. A defense like Nick Reiner's could hit the $1 million mark long before a single witness even took the stand. The financial mystery behind Nick's legal team quickly became the newest bombshell twist in a case already spinning Hollywood upside down. Everyone wanted to know, where was the money coming from? Reporters, analysts, and attorneys started running the numbers, and most agreed. A defense led by Alan Jackson, with that level of firepower, easily topped $1 million, maybe way more. But the bigger question was how Nick could possibly afford it. He hadn't had a major acting gig in years. No visible income streams, no sponsorships, no recent projects. Nothing that could explain that kind of money. That gap between Nick's public finances and his sky-high legal costs sent the media into overdrive. Speculation exploded online within hours, with every outlet chasing the same mystery. Who's footing the bill? Some insiders started claiming that money from the Reiner family estate might be covering his defense. But that theory immediately sparked controversy and plenty of legal confusion. Lawyers weighed in across news panels, explaining that using shared estate funds while an estate is still unsettled can be a messy gray zone. One attorney explained on live TV, in certain cases, a portion of family assets can go toward legal defense, but it's risky. It can trigger disputes, even lawsuits, especially from heirs who feel cut out. And that's exactly what seemed to be brewing behind the scenes. According to family sources, Romy Reiner was absolutely furious when she learned about the rumors. She reportedly told a close friend, "He's using money that doesn't even belong to him. Dad would never have allowed this." That quote hit the press like gasoline on fire. Suddenly, the Reiner tragedy wasn't just a criminal case when it was turning into a financial war. Estate lawyers, Hollywood insiders, and online commentators all jumped in, debating the ethics and legality of funding a defense like Nick's from the very fortune that once held their family together. And just like that, a new layer of drama unfolded, one that had nothing to do with blood evidence or forensic reports, but with money, legacy, and betrayal. Nick Reiner wasn't about to stay quiet. Through his legal team, he fired back hard, saying, "Every cent spent is legal and documented. Romy's just twisting things again." That bold statement only added more fuel to the already raging fire, splitting public opinion straight down the middle. Half of Hollywood seemed to believe him. The other half was ready to call him out. But inside the courtroom, none of that financial chaos even came up. The judge didn't ask. The prosecution didn't press. And Nick's defense team kept their lips sealed about where the money was coming from. Everything stayed cold, formal, and by the book, but outside those walls, the situation was pure madness. Reporters filled the courthouse steps, cameras rolling nonstop, as the public tore itself apart over the debate. Some argued that every person, and no matter the crime, deserves the best defense they can get. Others were furious at the idea that family-linked funds might be protecting the very man accused of destroying that same family. The contrast between the quiet courtroom and the chaos outside was surreal. And behind the scenes, even the Reiner family itself was splitting apart. According to insiders, not everyone wanted to see Nick punished to the fullest extent. Some relatives were reportedly pushing for compassion, saying he should get mental health treatment alongside the criminal process, not just a life sentence. It showed just how emotionally tangled this whole tragedy had become. This case wasn't just about evidence anymore. It was about family guilt, heartbreak, and what justice really meant when love and tragedy collided. Still, none of those whispers or rumors were ever confirmed. There were no official court filings, no public statements, no proof in writing, just chatter swirling through Hollywood and social media like a storm that wouldn't quit. Through it all, the prosecution stayed focused, cold, and confident. Their stance never wavered. They believed the evidence told a clear, solid story. The forensic reports, Nick's tracked movements, and the tight timeline of events all aligned perfectly in their eyes, pointing straight toward guilt. To them, this wasn't about family tension or emotional backstories. It was about facts. They said every detail, every timestamp, every piece of forensic data supported first-degree homicide charges without question. And while the courtroom stayed quiet, the world outside couldn't stop talking. The Reiner tragedy had transformed into something much bigger, a fight over truth, loyalty, and legacy, a story where love and betrayal sat side by side, and no one could tell which was which anymore. Prosecutors doubled down, hammering home their belief that the act was cold, deliberate, and calculated, the very definition of intent under California's toughest legal standard. With the special circumstances clause, 2 victims in the same tragic event, the stakes were now as high as the law could possibly take them.
And so when we're thinking about a person being inside, the real person being inside, I mean, what it has to take to do that to your own parents, reportedly after a heated argument at a party, that is sociopathic.
If convicted, Nick Reiner faced only 2 outcomes: life in prison without the possibility of parole, or a permanent sentence that meant he'd never walk free again. There was no middle ground, no plea deals, no leniency on the table. This was the hardest road the system had to offer. But while the courtroom stayed orderly and composed, the world outside was a storm. Every hour brought new rumors, fresh tips, and hidden leads. Detectives were still digging deep, and both sides of the case were quietly gearing up for what insiders were calling a massive legal showdown. Reporters whispered that both the prosecution and the defense had started hiring private investigators, professionals known for uncovering secrets that never make it into police reports. And then came talk of sealed evidence, confidential files, and mysterious court orders. The entire case was turning murkier by the day, and the public couldn't get enough. Amid the chaos, Romy reportedly told someone close to her, "I just want the truth out, whatever it takes." But Nick's team hit back hard. Through his lawyer, Nick released a statement saying, "I'm not guilty. I need help, not hate. Romy's lying to protect herself." That quote spread like wildfire, shaking the media and reigniting the debate over who the world should really believe. By this point, the battle wasn't just about guilt or innocence anymore. It had become a war over control, family loyalty, and public perception. Every word, every leaked detail, every soundbite felt like another spark in an already burning fire. Inside the courthouse, things might have looked calm. Motions filed, hearings scheduled, lawyers stone-faced and polite. But beneath that polished surface, the tension was suffocating. Everyone could feel it building, and it was only a matter of time before something big broke loose. And then it did. Within days, attention suddenly swung back to something Nick had said earlier, a statement that, at the time, hadn't made much noise. But now, with everything spiraling, those same words carried explosive new meaning. His comments would soon shake the entire story. forcing everyone, from detectives to the public, to rethink everything they thought they knew about the Reiner case. The media began calling it Nick's shocking revelation. In this statement, Nick finally opened up with raw emotion, revealing pieces of his past that no one had ever heard before. He spoke about his early years, about the loneliness that shadowed his childhood, and admitted he had never truly felt close to his father, Rob Reiner. It was the start of a confession that would blur the line between tragedy and truth, and it would change the way the world saw the entire case forever. Nick's revelation hit harder than anyone expected. He admitted that growing up, there was always a distance between him and his father, a quiet gap that made him feel like he didn't truly belong. "I loved my dad," Nick reportedly said, "but I always felt like I was on the outside of his world." That one confession sent shockwaves through everyone following the case. Rob Reiner had always been seen by the public as the picture of a devoted father, hands-on, warm, and deeply involved in his family's life. The man behind so many beloved stories of love and connection now faced a tragic narrative that mirrored the pain he'd spent his career trying to heal through film. Friends described Rob as a dad who showed up for family dinners, little league games, creative projects, always trying to build those memories that hold families together. But for Nick, it never quite clicked the same way. He said he often felt like a bystander watching from the edge of his own life, standing in the same room as everyone else, but feeling emotionally miles away. Those close to the Reiner family later shared that Rob truly tried. He wasn't distant out of choice. His demanding Hollywood career and the constant pressure of being a public figure may have created gaps he couldn't see, gaps that Nick struggled for years to bridge from the outside looking in. To the world, the Reiners looked like Hollywood's perfect family, stable, loving, supportive. But inside, Nick described something different. "I was surrounded by love," he once said, "but I couldn't feel it. It's like it stopped before it reached me." That line broke hearts across social media. People couldn't stop sharing it, arguing about whether it revealed something deeper, maybe even something that could explain the years of pain that had led to that tragic December night. Nick explained that this quiet loneliness didn't just appear out of nowhere. It built up slowly, year after year, until it became part of who he was. Friends who knew him back then described him as thoughtful but distant, introspective, and sometimes withdrawn. They said he often seemed to be chasing approval he never truly received, no matter how hard he tried. To psychologists and case analysts, this emotional backdrop suddenly reframed the entire story. It blurred the line between family tragedy and psychological breakdown. Was Nick a cold suspect or a son shaped by years of invisible hurt? And just when people thought they understood the Reiner case, Nick's openness cracked it wide open again. His confession painted a haunting portrait, not just of crime and loss, but of a lifetime spent fighting to be seen, to be heard, to be loved. It didn't excuse what happened, but it forced everyone to see the case through a new, more complicated lens. For the first time, Nick wasn't just the accused. He was a product of deep, unspoken pain that had been hiding in plain sight all along. Nick's confession left the world wondering just how deep the divide inside the Reiner family really went. As his feelings of isolation grew heavier, he began to drift farther from the family circle. What used to feel like home slowly turned into pressure, a space filled with expectations he couldn't meet and emotions he couldn't manage. So he started searching elsewhere for something that felt like belonging, chasing freedom anywhere he could find it. That search, though, led him down a dangerous road. It started small, a little escape here, a little release there, but soon spiraled into something much darker. That's when his struggles with substance use began. What began as experimentation turned into a powerful dependency that took hold fast. By just 15 years old, Nick's situation had already become so serious that he entered rehab for the first time. It was a devastating chapter that would shape the rest of his life. But one thing the Reiner family never did was hide from it. They didn't sweep it under the rug or pretend it wasn't happening. They faced it head on. Rob and Michelle poured their energy, time, and love into trying to pull their son back from the edge. Over and over again, they found new doctors, tried new programs, and never stopped hoping that this time would be the one that finally saved him. This wasn't some quiet family secret, it was a painful public fight to save their child from something that had already sunk its claws in deep. Nick would later admit that the substances he was using weren't just bad habits. They were powerful and dangerous, and they had control over him long before he realized it. "I thought I was in control," he once said, "but it was controlling me." That raw honesty gave people a rare glimpse into the darkness he'd been battling for years.
Dad's Rob Reiner, sort of like, isn't it amazing? You got to learn that your dad is Rob Reiner. He did not seem to find it nearly as amusing as the interviewer kind of set him up to express. It looked like he looks like he was struggling with a lot of resentment. And again, it's armchair quarterbacking, but I feel like it's just jumping off of the screen in those interviews, sadly.
It wasn't rebellion. It wasn't weakness. It was a war, one that kept pulling him under just when it seemed like he was getting back up. Nick's journey through addiction became a heartbreaking loop. Moments of hope followed by crushing setbacks. Every time things looked like they were turning around, another relapse would drag him back into the same pain all over again. Friends described it as watching someone they loved fight a ghost that wouldn't stop haunting him no matter how hard he tried to escape. To those who knew the Reiners, this wasn't a story about fame or failure anymore. It was about a family desperately trying to hold on to each other while watching one of their own slip away. And as Nick's words echoed through the media, it was clear that this part of his past wasn't just history. It was the key to understanding the storm that would eventually consume the entire family. Nick's life soon became a blur of constant motion, unpredictable, unstable, and filled with uncertainty. He drifted from Maine to New Jersey to Texas, never staying in one place long enough to call it home. These weren't adventures or glamorous travels. They were stretches of survival, nights in temporary housing, days trying to figure out what came next. Each move was another attempt to outrun the chaos inside him. Through all that turmoil, one thing stayed the same. Rob and Michelle Reiner never gave up on their son, not once. No matter how far Nick wandered or how dark things got, they stayed present. They showed up. They kept believing. Friends close to the family said Rob and Michelle's patience was unshakable. They were there through every low, making phone calls, finding specialists, and paying for yet another treatment program, no matter the cost. One family friend remembered Rob saying, "If we stop trying, he'll stop believing he can change." That single line summed up how they faced everything, with relentless love and a kind of hope that refused to die no matter how bad things got. Rob and Michelle were never ashamed to speak publicly about Nick's struggles. In interviews, they were raw and honest. No excuses, no blame, no polished Hollywood spin. They didn't hide behind their fame or reputation. They poured everything, emotionally, financially, spiritually, into helping Nick heal. To them, this wasn't about public image or failure. It was about love, about the desperate belief that somewhere inside all that pain, their son was still there, waiting for a way home. Even when hope seemed paper thin, they didn't back away. Those close to the family said that Rob and Michelle refused to turn their backs, even when friends warned them they were giving too much. But that's who they were, the kind of parents who believed that love didn't stop just because things got hard. Then, in a moment of pure fatherly determination, Rob decided to try something completely different, something creative, personal, and from the heart. He wanted to reach Nick in a way that went beyond therapy or treatment. He wanted to connect with him through art. So, instead of keeping his Hollywood career separate from his family life, Rob invited his son directly into his world, the world of filmmaking. And in 2015, father and son joined forces to create the deeply emotional movie, Being Charlie. That project wasn't just another film. It was a lifeline, a real attempt by a father to reach his son through shared passion, honesty, and storytelling. It became a symbol of hope, a glimpse of healing that showed for a brief moment that maybe love and creativity together could finally bring Nick home again. The film Being Charlie was more than a project. It was personal. A story pulled straight from Nick Reiner's real-life battles with addiction and recovery. The movie didn't sugarcoat anything or hide behind Hollywood gloss. It told the truth, raw, honest, and emotional. It showed relapse, resistance, heartbreak, and that endless uphill fight to get better. And during production, something incredible began to happen. Something no one had seen in Nick for years. He started showing up early, focused, and determined. Working shoulder to shoulder with his father gave him something he hadn't felt in a long time, a purpose. For the first time, he wasn't just surviving it, he was thriving. One crew member later shared, "You could see it. He was proud of what they were building together." That energy spread through the entire set. People could feel that this movie wasn't just fiction. It was healing in motion. For a moment, it looked like a brand new chapter was beginning for the Reiners. Rob and Michelle dared to believe that maybe, just maybe, their son was finally turning the corner. They saw glimpses of discipline, confidence, and in Nick that hadn't been there in years. He smiled more. He stayed grounded. The chaos that had followed him for so long seemed to fade into the background, at least for a while. Friends close to the family said even Rob looked different. Lighter, calmer, finally hopeful again. He reportedly told one of them, "This project saved both of us for a while." That movie became more than just a creative outlet. It was a lifeline between father and son. It gave them common ground, something therapy and time had never quite managed to build. Through the work, they found a new kind of bond, one made not of perfect answers, but of shared pain and purpose. But sadly, that fragile peace didn't last. Not long after being Charlie-wrapped production, the storm crept back in. Nick slipped again, returning to the same destructive patterns that had haunted him for years. The cycle of relapse and recovery began all over, pulling him and his family right back into heartbreak. What had once been a flicker of hope quickly unraveled into confusion, distance, and exhaustion. Each relapse hit harder than the one before, leaving Nick's spirit cracked and his parents drained, desperate and afraid they were running out of strength. Yet even in the middle of that heartbreak, one thing stayed true. Those who knew Rob and Michelle Reiner said their love for their son never wavered. No matter how dark things got, they refused to let go of the belief that somewhere deep down, Nick still wanted to find his way back home. Rob Reiner never stopped believing his son could find his way back again, not for a single moment. But in the years leading up to the tragedy that would later shake Hollywood, the concern within the Reiner family kept rising higher and higher. What had once been a familiar cycle of recovery and relapse started spinning faster, tighter, until it felt completely out of control. Each round hit harder than the one before. What used to seem manageable with rehab, therapy, and patience had turned unpredictable, chaotic, and frightening. Even the calmest family moments started feeling tense, like everyone was holding their breath, waiting for the next storm to hit. Through it all, Rob and Michelle Reiner never gave up trying. They offered Nick love, structure, and every ounce of support they could give. But as anyone who's lived through it knows, love doesn't always silence fear. Friends close to the family revealed that fear had quietly become part of their everyday lives. They weren't just worrying about whether Nick would stay clean anymore. They were starting to worry about themselves, about emotional limits, safety, and how much more they could take. It wasn't about anger or blame. It was heartbreak mixed with exhaustion, a constant battle between wanting to help and needing to protect their own peace. That emotional distance Nick had talked about years earlier, that invisible wall between him and his father, had only grown heavier with time. What had once been love tangled with misunderstanding had turned into something even harder to define. Love wrapped in fear, hope mixed with guilt, connection buried under disappointment. A family friend later summed it up perfectly. They never stopped loving him, but they started to realize love alone might not be enough anymore. Rob and Michelle had built their lives on compassion and second chances, but by the end, even they seemed worn thin. Two parents trapped in a heartbreaking cycle that kept repeating no matter how many times they tried to rewrite the ending. By the time that glittering Christmas party rolled around, the one that would change everything, the tension inside the Reiner home had been simmering for years. What happened that night wasn't some random explosion out of nowhere. It wasn't a sudden argument. It was the final spark in a buildup of pain, frustration, and emotional exhaustion that had been quietly burning beneath the surface for far too long. The world would see the headlines and the scandal, but those who knew the Reiners understood the truth. This tragedy didn't start in one night of chaos. It was the heartbreaking result of years of love, fear, and struggle colliding all at once. Every rehab stay, every desperate late-night phone call, every tear-filled conversation, it all piled up, adding weight to a bond already stretched to its breaking point. And that night, it finally snapped. And according to a source close to the investigation, Nick later claimed the explosive argument that night wasn't what people think it was. It was Romy who twisted it, he allegedly said. She wanted everyone to blame me. But Romy, on the other hand, reportedly told a friend, "Nick's rewriting history again. We were scared of what he might do." It was clear, even before that December night, that the emotional distance Nick had talked about since childhood had never really gone away. That same emptiness had followed him into adulthood, shaping every relationship, every relapse, every decision he made. Friends said it was like he carried a quiet storm inside him, something heavy that never fully left, even during the rare moments when things seemed to be getting better. He could smile, he could work, he could pretend things were under control. But that shadow of disconnection was always there, pulling at him from the inside. And eventually, it began pulling at everyone around him, too. Then came the tragedy, the devastating loss of Rob Reiner and Michelle Singer Reiner, and the entire world went silent. Hollywood froze, the headlines blurred together, and everyone waited for the family's response. When the Reiners finally broke their silence, their words hit like a tidal wave of heartbreak. The first official statement came as a joint message from Romy Reiner and Jake Reiner, and it stopped everyone cold. There was no legal talk, no theories, no blame, just raw emotion, pure love, and unbearable loss. They wrote that the pain of losing their parents was unimaginable, a wound no words could ever heal. It wasn't written like a press release. It read like a letter straight from two grieving hearts. Their message didn't focus on Hollywood fame or film legacies. It didn't mention Rob as a legendary filmmaker or Michelle as a social figure. Instead, it spoke of them as parents, as the people who brought warmth and laughter into every room, who held the family together even when life was falling apart around them. Friends of the family said reading the statement felt almost poetic, like love written through tears. It reminded the world that beneath the headlines and scandals were two people who had built their lives around compassion, creativity, and connection. The Reiner family's words stripped away the noise, the rumors, the courtroom drama, leaving only the simple, devastating truth of what had been lost. Two souls who had spent their lives giving light to others, and two children left, trying to find their way through a darkness they never saw coming. The Reiner family's statement was more than just words. It was a reminder that behind all the headlines, gossip, and courtroom chaos stood a family broken in ways no one outside could ever truly understand. Their message painted a clear emotional picture. This wasn't another Hollywood scandal. It was heartbreak on the most personal level. A home that once overflowed with laughter, creativity, and love had gone completely silent. Yet, even in the middle of their grief, Romy and Jake Reiner found the strength to express gratitude. They thanked the world for the outpouring of compassion that came flooding in. Messages from fans, friends, and strangers alike. Condolences and memories poured in from across the globe, from legendary actors, fellow directors, family friends, and even people who'd never met the Reiners, but had been deeply touched by Rob's films and Michelle's kindness. But hidden within that same statement came one simple, powerful request: privacy. The Reiners asked for space, not attention, not headlines, not pity, just space to grieve, to breathe, and to begin putting the shattered pieces of their lives back together, away from the chaos of flashing cameras and endless speculation. They didn't want sympathy on display. They wanted silence, dignity, and a chance to mourn in peace, and they meant it. Since that day, there have been no interviews, no press conferences, and no official updates from the family. They chose silence, not as an escape, but as a form of protection. Protection for their peace, and maybe for the truth still unraveling behind closed doors. Still, they wouldn't stop whispering. Rumors began swirling again, this time around Nick himself. Multiple outlets claimed he had tried to reach out from custody, desperate to speak with his siblings, to explain his side, or maybe just to say something. According to one anonymous insider, Romy allegedly responded through her lawyer, "We need distance. This isn't the time." That statement, short but powerful, spoke volumes. It revealed the deep, painful divide that now ran through what was once one of Hollywood's most admired families. The heartbreak wasn't just about losing Rob and Michelle anymore. It was about everything that came after, the silence, the distance, and the unanswered questions that seemed to hang in the air like ghosts. The Reiners weren't just mourning their parents. They were trying to survive the storm that had torn their world apart. Their tragedy had become something no camera could capture, a private battle between grief, guilt, and survival. And as the world waited for answers, the one thing everyone could agree on was that the Reiner story, once a tale of love and legacy, had now become one of Hollywood's most haunting and human heartbreaks. In the aftermath of losing Rob Reiner and Michelle Singer Reiner.
And he has been in and out of rehab himself, and now is posting, I guess he's clean and sober at the moment, and he's posting something like Mental Health Mondays posts on his Instagram.
The family made one of the hardest but clearest decisions they could, to step away from the public eye. No cameras, no press, no noise. They quietly withdrew, choosing to grieve far from Hollywood's constant glare. This chapter, once soaked in heartbreak, reflection, and love, belonged entirely to them. They organized a private memorial to honor Rob and Michelle's lives, a small, deeply personal gathering meant only for those who had truly known and loved them. The service was described as simple, yet breathtakingly beautiful, held in a peaceful, candle-lit space filled with soft music, flowers, and gentle silence. It wasn't about fame, awards, or legacy. It was about love, about gratitude, about remembering two people who had shaped lives both inside and outside of Hollywood. Attendees later described the event as tender and human, filled with tears, laughter, and quiet moments of reflection. There were no reporters, no flashes, no microphones, just family, lifelong friends, and a handful of Rob's most trusted collaborators. Everyone who was there came not out of obligation or publicity, but because they truly cared. One close friend shared afterward, it wasn't a Hollywood goodbye, it was a family one. Every story told that day came straight from the heart. No talk of movie sets or award ceremonies. Instead, they spoke about dinners shared, phone calls that lasted hours, inside jokes, and the kind of love that lingers long after the spotlight fades. Those who attended said it felt gentle, honest, and real. A farewell built not on glamour, but on genuine connection. The kind of goodbye that reminded everyone what really matters when the cameras turn off. But while the family mourned in private, Hollywood's grief rippled fast and wide. News of Rob and Michelle's loss spread across every corner of the entertainment world, leaving a trail of heartfelt tributes in its wake. Actors, directors, producers, people from every generation began sharing stories, photos, and memories of the couple who had touched their lives. Social media lit up with love and gratitude, each post painting a picture of two people who had left an undeniable mark on everyone who crossed their path. Kathy Bates, who had worked with Rob early in her career, shared an especially emotional message. She said, "He gave actors space to be brave. He trusted us, and that made all the difference." Her words echoed what so many others were feeling, that Rob and Michelle's true legacy wasn't just in the films, the fame, or the red carpets. It was in the humanity they carried through it all, the kindness, the mentorship, the love that followed them everywhere they went. And even as the world continued to mourn them publicly, the Reiner family stayed silent, holding their grief close, protecting what was left of their peace. Because for them, this wasn't just loss. It was love remembered. Kate Hudson was one of the first to post, sharing a heartfelt message that stopped fans in their tracks. She credited Rob Reiner for shaping generations of performers and storytellers, calling him a creative father figure for anyone lucky enough to work beside him. Her words captured what so many in Hollywood already knew. Rob wasn't just a director, he was a force of kindness, wisdom, and belief in the people around him. Actor Nick Robinson, who had worked with Rob later in his career, echoed the same emotion. He described Rob as a mentor who never talked down to anyone, just guided you with calm confidence. Every tribute that poured in carried its own unique warmth, but they all shared the same heartbeat. Rob Reiner wasn't just a filmmaker. He was a builder of people. His film sets weren't just workplaces. They were safe spaces filled with collaboration, laughter, and trust. His leadership was patient, his energy genuine, and his vision bigger than just the screen in front of him. Even those who had never met him personally wrote about how Rob's stories had changed their lives. How films like Stand By Me and When Harry Met Sally taught them about connection, empathy, and the beauty of imperfection. As Hollywood mourned, one truth became crystal clear. Rob Reiner's legacy couldn't be measured by trophies or box office numbers. It lived in the hearts of everyone he had lifted, inspired, and believed in. And even though his absence felt unbearable, his voice, both as an artist and as a human being, would never fade away. Across the world, hearts turned not to the loss, but to the legacy, the incredible creative spirit Rob had left behind. His storytelling reached far beyond the glitz of Hollywood or the noise of fame. His work wasn't built on explosions or spectacle. It was built on people, emotion, and truth. Rob had a rare gift. He could take ordinary human moments and turn them into unforgettable art that stayed with audiences for a lifetime. His films became cultural landmarks not because they shouted, but because they spoke directly to the soul. The Princess Bride remains a timeless masterpiece. That perfect balance of humor, romance, and adventure wrapped in fairy tale wonder. Fans still quote it decades later, proof that Rob's touch could make fantasy feel human and hope feel real. And Stand By Me, oh, that one still stands tall. To this day, it's seen as one of the most honest portrayals of childhood friendship ever captured on film. It showed how love, loss, and loyalty can shape who we become long after the credits roll. From laughter to tears, from heartbreak to hope, Rob Reiner's work wasn't just entertainment, it was connection. His stories made people feel seen, heard, and understood, and that's the kind of magic that never fades. And then there was When Harry Met Sally, the film that didn't just define romantic comedy, it reinvented it. With sharp, witty dialogue and genuine emotion, it proved that love stories didn't need glitz or grand gestures to feel real. They just needed heart. The movie became a cultural moment, the kind that people still quote, still debate, and still feel decades later. Critics, actors, and directors all agreed Rob Reiner's genius was in his consistency. He cared about every frame, every line, every performance. His sets weren't chaotic or ego-driven. They were calm, focused, and grounded. Everyone who worked with him said the same thing. He led with trust, not control. One longtime collaborator described it perfectly. Rob made every actor feel like a partner, not a pawn. That's why his work feels so alive. That's the secret. Rob's films never needed gimmicks or shock value. They didn't rely on special effects or cheap tricks. Instead, they drew strength from something much deeper, real people and real feelings. Whether it was laughter, heartbreak, or quiet nostalgia, Rob's movies connected audiences to the story, and somehow to each other. That's what made his body of work not just successful, but timeless. And while Rob's name often shined in headlines and award shows, those closest to him never forgot the person who helped make that brilliance possible, Michelle Singer Reiner. Though she preferred to stay out of the spotlight, her presence shaped everything. Michelle was the calm behind the creativity, the quiet force balancing the chaos of fame with grace, compassion, and strength. Where Rob created stories for the world, Michelle built the foundation that kept their family and his spirit grounded. She wasn't chasing cameras or red carpets. She was pouring her heart into causes that mattered, from philanthropy to community work, always pushing for a world that was kinder and more inclusive. Friends who knew them both described Rob and Michelle as completely in sync. Two people who didn't just share a marriage, but a mission. They moved through life as true partners, facing every challenge side by side. He was the visionary. She was the anchor. He built stories for millions. She built the peace that allowed him to dream. Together, they weren't just a Hollywood couple. They were a team, a living example of love that lasted beyond the fame, beyond the work, beyond the lights. And now, in their absence, that bond, that shared strength, is exactly what everyone remembers most. One close friend summed it up perfectly. They didn't just build a family, they built a legacy of love. Rob and Michelle Reiner weren't just Hollywood icons, they were anchors. Their story was never about fame or celebrity. It was about connection, resilience, and the kind of love that lasts far beyond the spotlight. Their partnership became a living testament to what devotion really looks like: steady, quiet, and endlessly strong. But as heartfelt tributes poured in from every corner of Hollywood, a haunting contrast began to take shape. The world was celebrating Rob Reiner's incredible legacy, his genius, his humanity, his art, while his own family was quietly being torn apart behind the scenes. The public celebration of his life stood in painful tension with the private heartbreak that wouldn't let go. The same Hollywood community that had once cheered for his brilliance now watched with unease as the Reiner family's legal and emotional battles played out in real time. For the Reiners, grief and legacy had become inseparable. Two forces twisting together into one unforgettable, tragic story. Their love, their loss, and their fame were no longer separate chapters. They had fused into a single narrative, a heartbreaking portrait of what happens when the human cost of fame meets the weight of tragedy. Across Hollywood, the lights still shined for Rob and Michelle. Tributes filled social feeds, award shows paused for emotional mentions, and fans shared stories about how the Reiners had touched their lives. But behind those glowing words and public gestures, the family's private reality remained unbearably heavy. Behind closed doors, they weren't basking in nostalgia, they were surviving heartbreak. While Hollywood mourned the legend, the family was left wrestling with the pain of everything that came after: grief, confusion, and the shadow of a legal war they never asked for. Two worlds now existed side by side, one drenched in warmth and memory, the other in sorrow and chaos. And though they seemed separate, the lines between them began to blur. The world's love for Rob and Michelle clashed with the courtroom updates, the testimonies, and the speculations surrounding their son. Each new development in court seemed to twist the story tighter. Every statement, every piece of evidence, every emotional outburst added more tension to an already unbearable truth. The prosecutors stood firm, confident in their case. The defense dug in deeper, refusing to back down. And through it all, the mystery at the heart of the Reiner tragedy still refused to settle. What had started as a Hollywood love story had now become something no one could have imagined. A legacy drenched in both light and loss, beauty and pain. And somewhere between those two worlds, the truth waited, still tangled, still hidden, still haunting everyone who dared to look too closely. Every time it felt like the truth might finally rise to the surface, something, another rumor, another leak, another shadow, pulled it right back into the fog. Whispers started swirling again. Some claimed that new evidence was quietly being reviewed behind closed doors, evidence that could flip the entire case upside down. Others hinted that one of the Reiner siblings had shared something private with investigators, something explosive that still hasn't been revealed to the public. Whatever the truth really is, it still feels just out of reach, like trying to grab smoke with your hands. Meanwhile, Hollywood keeps grieving. The tributes, the memorials, the candlelit gatherings, they're everywhere. Studio lots still echo with stories of Rob and Michelle Reiner, while social feeds overflow with clips, quotes, and heartfelt memories. Every post is a bittersweet reminder that behind all the headlines and courtroom documents were real people, not just stars, but parents, partners, and friends whose lives shaped entire generations. Their absence still lingers in the film world, in their quiet Brentwood neighborhood, and in the hearts of everyone who loved them. But even now, months later, as the lights fade and the cameras move on, one question refuses to die down. What really happened inside that Brentwood home? Nick Reiner still insists he's innocent, claiming that Romy knows more than she's saying. Meanwhile, Romy stands her ground, saying Nick's twisting the truth, the world remains split, half believing one side, half clinging to the other. And in between, the mystery continues to grow deeper, darker, and harder to untangle. Was it heartbreak, betrayal, a hidden truth no one's ready to face? Every new whisper seems to pull the story in a different direction. Maybe there's a missing piece still buried out there, something that could rewrite everything we think we know about that December night. So now the question turns to you. What do you believe? Was Nick Reiner truly responsible for what happened that night? Or is there another truth, one that's been hidden all along? Drop your theories in the comments. We want to hear everything. And if this story has left you questioning everything you thought you knew about Hollywood's most haunting mystery, then don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more untold sagas from behind the silver screen.